Hello everyone, I am Asif Moiz, Assistant Professor in the Department of Electronics and Communication Engineering, Madanapalle Institute of Technology and Science, Madanapalle. Uh, Welcome to the course of Communication System. It's a basic communication system in which we will read modulation and demodulations, functions of long distance transmission and receptions. Uh, so for this, we have elements of communication system, classification of communication system, line and radio communication, transmission channel, modulation, demodulation, antenna. So these are the parts of communication systems, and in this we will read continuous wave and pulse modulation. Also, we will read about amplitude modulation, frequency modulation, phase modulation. One more type of modulation is there, pulse modulation, in which we will read about pulse amplitude modulation, pulse width modulation, pulse position modulation. Theory of communication system. Definition, we can say communication is a process of conveying a message at a distance. In other words, it can be defined as the process of transfer of message or information from source to destination. If the distance involved is beyond the direct communication, the communication engineering comes into the picture. We have a block diagram in which input message is going on in the transmitter, and there is a transmission channel, and in the channel there is an introduction of channel noise also. After that, receiver part is there, and after receiver, output is there. The basic elements of radio wave communication is information source. After that, input transducer is there. The function of input transducer is to convert sound, picture, speech, data, whatever we are giving, that will be converted to electrical signals. So after input transducer, information is converted to electrical form. After that, it goes to modulator, where RF oscillator is also there. After modulator, whatever signal we get, that goes to transmitter, where antenna is the main part of that, and after antenna it is transmitted to the transmission channel. It can be a free space or it can be a wired channel. In the transmission channel, noise is also introduced by itself, that makes efficiency a little bit low. But after transmission channel, the signal goes to receiver, where it is demodulated. Here again we use RF oscillator, and after that, after demodulation, carrier signal is separated, and output transducer plays a role which converts the electrical form of the signal into the original form. After that, it is sent to the destination. So here we can see modulator is the device, or modulator is a component where our message signal is in the form of electrical form, that is accumulated, that is mixed with the carrier signal. But in demodulation, uh, again RF oscillator is used to separate the message signal from the carrier signal. The branch of engineering which deals with the communication system is known as telecommunication engineering. The telecommunication means for long distance communication engineering. So telecommunication engineering is classified into two parts. One is line communication or transmission line communication. One is radio communication or radio wave communication. In line communication, media of transmission is a pair of conductors called transmission line. In this technique, signals are directly transmitted through the transmission line. The installation and maintenance of the transmission line is, of course, not only costly but complex and overcrowds the open space. So it's better to use radio communications that we are using also this time in the world. Wireless communication is there, and that doesn't depend on the transmission line. Here, media of transmission is a free space. If we talk about the transmission channel, we have line or transmission line, that is conducted media, and another one is free space or radiated media. So in a line, transmission line or conducted media, we have coaxial cable, two-state pair, parallel wires, optical fibers, and many others. In free space, we know the medium of transmission of signal is carried out by propagation of electromagnetic waves. Modulation, definition of modulation that we used in the basic elements or basic components. So modulation is defined as the process by which some characteristics of a carrier wave are varied in accordance with the modulating wave or message signals. So what the characteristics can be? The characteristics can be amplitude, frequency, and phase. So these are the characteristics of the carrier wave signals, which are varied or changed in accordance with the message signal, the original form of the signal in the electrical form. If we talk about the just reverse part of that, that is demodulation. So demodulation is the reverse process of modulation. Modulation here, in modulation, it is performed at the transmitting side, whereas demodulation is always performed at the receiving side. So in analog modulation, sinusoidal signal is used as a carrier, where in digital modulation, pulse train is used as a carrier. Continuous wave modulation, after that we will see the uh, pulse modulation also. So in continuous wave modulation, we have three types. One is amplitude modulation, one is frequency modulation, third one is phase modulation. So as per the characteristics of the carrier signals, we have three types of modulation. So in amplitude modulation, the modulation is done where amplitude of the carrier signal is changed according to the instantaneous value of modulating signals, but we keep frequency and phase as constant. In frequency modulation, same thing is done, but we change the frequency of the carrier signal according to the in accordance with the instantaneous value of modulating signal, keeping amplitude and phase, other two characteristics, as same. Similarly, in the phase modulation, it is a modulation process in which phase of the carrier signal is changed or varied in accordance with the instantaneous value of modulating signal, but we keep frequency and amplitude as constant. So if one parameter out of three parameters, if one parameter is being changed, two others are kept constant. After that, we read carrier can be a pulse train also. So in this type, we have three types of modulations: pulse amplitude modulation, pulse width modulation, and pulse position modulation. So if the carrier wave is a pulse in nature or pulse train in nature, then it is a pulse modulation. So in pulse amplitude modulation, what happens? Pulse amplitude modulation, or PAM, is an analog scheme in which amplitude of the pulse is proportional to the amplitude of the signal at the instant of sampling. Or in other words, in PAM, amplitude of the pulse is changed in accordance with the instantaneous value of modulating signal. Modulating signal is nothing but the message signal or original information in the electrical form. So similarly, pulse width modulation, in this type, amplitude is maintained constant. Amplitude is constant, but width of each pulse is varied or changed in accordance with the instantaneous value of analog signal. Similarly, in pulse position modulation, PPM, we see the sampled waveform has fixed amplitude and width, whereas position of each pulse is varied as per instantaneous value of analog signal. So in pulse amplitude modulation, amplitude is varied, but we keep position and width constant. In pulse width modulation, width is changed, but amplitude and position is constant. In pulse position modulation, we keep amplitude and width constant, but position is changed. So these are the characteristics of the carrier wave, which are changed in accordance with the instantaneous value of analog signal. So summary about the modulation, we have discussed two types of modulation. One is continuous wave modulation, other one is pulse modulation. In continuous wave modulation, we have discussed amplitude modulation, and one more is angle modulation. So amplitude modulation and angle modulation. In angle modulation, there are two types: phase modulation and frequency modulation. But people used to say in continuous wave modulation, AM, FM, PM, amplitude modulation, frequency modulation, phase modulation. That also we can say, or else we can divide it into amplitude modulation and angle modulation, which again is divided into frequency modulation and phase modulation. Although we have two types of phase modulation, wideband phase modulation and narrowband frequency modulation is divided into two parts. One is wideband frequency modulation, another one is narrowband frequency modulation. But this video will be a lengthier one, so we will skip this for another video. Amplitude modulation has three types. We have a double sideband with suppressed carriers, vestigial sideband, and single sideband. Delta modulation is also there for the pulse modulation, pulse amplitude modulation, and pulse digital modulation. So in pulse amplitude modulation and pulse time modulation is there. In pulse time modulation, we have PWM and PPM. PWM is pulse width modulation, PPM is pulse position modulation, and pulse digital modulation, we have pulse code modulation, differential pulse code modulation, and delta modulation, DM will be there. So these are the types of modulations. So if you have any queries or questions, kindly leave your queries here. Thank you.